The lobby of Sullivan and Crane smelled like carpet cleaner and old paper, the way law offices do when the cleaning crew finishes too early and the heating comes on before the windows have aired. Robert stood at the front desk at 6:58 on a Thursday morning, signing for a courier delivery that no one else would have been there to receive. Frances, who arrived every day at 6:45 without fail, and kept a small ceramic dish of wrapped peppermints at the edge of her workstation, slid the clipboard across to him with the particular look she reserved for things she had noticed and chosen not to say aloud. He signed, handed it back, and picked up the package. It was addressed to the managing partner's office, third floor. He would take it up when the elevator finished its morning diagnostic cycle, which always ran long on cold days. In the meantime, he set it on the desk beside the peppermint dish and went to start the coffee in the second-floor kitchen, because no one else would do that either. That was his world. 6 years of it, give or take a few weeks around either end. Robert Sullivan had come to the firm in the way that capable people sometimes come to places that do not fully see them, through competence rather than connection, performing tasks that kept the entire operation running smoothly while remaining mostly invisible to the people the operation existed to serve. He was 41 years old, medium height, with careful hands, and the particular stillness of someone who has learned that stillness is less expensive than explanation. He held the title of office administrator, which in practice meant he managed the supply contracts, scheduled the building maintenance, handled all courier and filing logistics, coordinated catering for client meetings, and fixed anything that broke, including things that no one told him had broken until they were badly broken, and the fixing took twice as long. He earned a salary that had not changed significantly in 3 years. His office, if you could call it that, was a half-walled alcove on the second floor between the supply closet and the server room, furnished with a steel-legged desk, 2 filing cabinets that predated him, and a window that looked out over the building's mechanical terrace. Carol Weston occupied the corner office at the end of the third-floor corridor, with windows on 2 sides and a credenza that held exactly 9 legal volumes arranged by spine color rather than subject. She had been a senior associate at Sullivan and Crane for 11 years, long enough to have acquired a particular authority over the firm's administrative culture without holding any formal authority over its administrative staff. She treated Robert the way certain people treat the architecture of a building they have worked in for a long time, aware of it only when something was inconvenient, indifferent to it otherwise. She called him by his first name when she needed something and by his job title when she was performing for someone else. She had once introduced him to a client as the gentleman who manages our paper situation, and the client had nodded with the polite disinterest of someone who has been told where the coat rack is. The coffee finished at 7:20. Robert poured the first cup, as he always did, and carried it to Frances at the front desk, because she was there before everyone else, and no one ever thought to bring her one. She accepted it with both hands, the way she always did, and said, "We have a new temp starting today." Robert set the empty carafe back on the tray. "Which desk?" "The one by the east wall in filing. They cleared it yesterday afternoon." Frances wrapped both palms around the cup. "She's apparently here for the audit prep. Document review and cross-referencing mostly." He nodded. The firm had been preparing for a third-party compliance review for the better part of 2 months. Document review was granular, time-consuming work that the associates outsourced without ceremony. The new temp arrived at 8:15, which Robert knew because he was on the second floor replacing a toner cartridge in the copy machine when he heard Frances give the standard building access orientation at the front desk below. He finished with the cartridge, washed the ink off his hands in the supply room sink, and went downstairs to check whether the east wall desk had been restocked with the access credentials it would need. It had not. The building's access system required a keyed credential for the file room on 3, the server room on 2, and the parking structure if applicable. Standard procedure was for credentials to be prepared 24 hours before a new staff member arrived. Someone had not followed standard procedure. This was not unusual. Robert went to his desk, pulled up the access management interface, and spent 12 minutes generating and activating a credential set under the new account name, which the intake form listed as Delia Marsh, temporary file clerk, start date that morning. He printed the credential card, put it in a plain envelope, walked to the east wall desk in the filing department, and set it next to the keyboard. Delia was not at her desk yet. She was apparently still filling out onboarding paperwork with the HR coordinator 2 doors down. Robert left the envelope where she would find it and went back to his own work. He did not see her until 11 o'clock, when he was crossing the second-floor corridor with a box of archived folders for the compliance shelf. She was coming from the opposite direction, carrying a legal pad and a look of focused quiet, and she stepped to one side to let him pass with the box. He nodded his thanks and kept moving. She said nothing, which was fine. He did not require conversation from people he had just done something practical for. She was at his desk 20 minutes later. "The envelope on my keyboard," she said. "Was that you?" He looked up from the inventory spreadsheet. "Building access credentials. They weren't prepped for your start date, so I generated them this morning." She studied him with an expression he could not immediately categorize. Not gratitude exactly, or not only that, something more considered. "Thank you," she said plainly, without the self-conscious undertone people sometimes used when they were surprised that someone had done something for them. "Standard setup," he said. She nodded once like someone confirming a fact they had already suspected, and left. It was a small exchange. He did not think about it, particularly for the rest of that morning. The firm operated on a rhythm that Robert had memorized the way a technician memorizes the cycle of a machine he is responsible for maintaining. Monday and Wednesday mornings were for partner correspondence and external mail. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons were for internal document circulation and filing updates. Friday before noon was for end-of-week compliance checks, supply reorders, and any deferred maintenance that had accumulated across the week. Client meetings ran on Tuesday and Thursday evenings when partners needed the conference rooms, and those evenings required catering coordination, presentation setup, and the specific arrangement of the third-floor boardroom that the senior partners preferred and had never formally documented anywhere except in Robert's memory. He kept the machine running. The machine did not notice him. Carol noticed him on Tuesday afternoon, which was to say she required something from him on Tuesday afternoon, and located him for that purpose. She appeared at the entrance to his alcove at 2:45 with a clipboard and a look of moderate irritation. "Robert, I need you to go to the records office on Bleecker and pick up the Hartwell exhibits. The courier we scheduled can't make the window." He looked at his screen. He had a supply vendor call at 3. "I can reschedule my 3 o'clock, he said. "Good." She was already turning back toward the corridor. "The Hartwell closing is tomorrow at 9. I need those exhibits logged and indexed tonight." "I'll need the case reference number." She paused without turning around, in the way of someone who finds the request mildly unreasonable. "Check with paralegal services. They'll have it." She did not say, "Thank you." She did not need to. That was not how the architecture of their exchange worked. He called the vendor, rescheduled to Thursday, sent a note to the paralegal on the Hartwell file, received the reference number, and left for Bleecker Street at 3:15 in the rain, without an umbrella because the one in his supply closet had gone missing sometime in the previous 2 weeks, and he had not yet replaced it. It was while he was walking back from Bleecker, carrying the Hartwell exhibits in a sealed document envelope under his arm, that he passed the small Indian takeout place on Farrow Street with the yellow awning and the hand-lettered lunch specials board, and thought about the conversation he had not meant to have at the supply closet that morning. He had been counting reams of legal paper when Delia came to the closet for a new legal pad. They were the same kind of pads the firm had always stocked, yellow, wide-ruled, with the cardboard backing that lasted exactly one refill before it bent. She had taken one from the shelf and then paused, looking at the stack of reams, and said, "Do you order these yourself, or does someone approve the requisition?" "I order them," he said. "In what quantity?" he told her. 24 reams per quarter, which was slightly more than the firm used in a slow quarter and slightly less than it used in a busy one, calibrated across 6 years of observation. She had written something on the first page of the new pad and left without further comment. He had thought it was a strange question for a file clerk to ask, and then he had not thought about it again until now, on Farrow Street in the rain. He stopped at the yellow awning and bought 2 orders of the lamb curry because it was lunchtime and he had not eaten, and the portions were generous enough to be worth the cost. He ate his in the firm's supply alcove with the door open, listening to the building's heating system tick and settle in the corridor outside. The second order he left on the corner of his desk in a closed container because the east wall filing department was 3 turns from his alcove, and he had seen Delia eating at her desk the previous day from a paper bag that contained what appeared to be a single container of yogurt and a sleeve of crackers. He did not think of it as a gesture. He thought of it as practical, the way correcting the building access had been practical. You noticed a gap and you filled it, not because someone was watching, but because the gap was there. She appeared at his desk 20 minutes later with the empty container which she set quietly on the corner of his desk. "That was yours," she said. "I had enough." She looked at him for a moment, the same considering quality as before, patient and unhurried. "I'll bring lunch tomorrow," she said, which was not a question. He shrugged once, neither accepting nor refusing, and she took that as agreement, because the following day she appeared at noon with 2 containers from a different place, something with rice and braised greens that was considerably better than the lamb curry had been. They ate in the back corner of the second-floor corridor near the window that overlooked the mechanical terrace, because his alcove only had 1 chair and the conference rooms were in use. She ate with the same economical focus she brought to everything, not filling the silence with talk, not performing sociability. He ate his rice and watched the pigeons navigate the mechanical terrace below. She asked, eventually, how long he had worked at the firm. 6 years, he said, in administration the whole time. Yes. She nodded slowly. There was a small pause before she said, "Do you find the work satisfying?" It was a strange question, and not in the way that questions about supply reams were strange. Those were operational. This one was the kind of question people did not usually ask each other in professional settings, particularly not people who had known each other for 4 days. He considered it honestly before he answered. "The work gets done or it doesn't," he said. "When it gets done right, the whole firm runs without interruption. Nobody notices that. When it doesn't get done right, everyone notices immediately." He paused. "There's a satisfaction in the first case that doesn't require anyone to be watching." She was quiet for a moment. "That's a generous way to put it," she said. "It's the accurate way," he said. Another pause, and then she said, "Yes, I suppose it is." She gathered her container and her napkin and said she had a filing deadline at 1. He watched her go, then turned back to the window, where 2 pigeons had arrived at the mechanical terrace's lower shelf and were conducting what appeared to be a territorial negotiation of very small stakes. He stayed at his desk until 7:30 that evening, finishing the Hartwell Index. He logged the exhibits, cross-referenced the file numbers against the morning brief, and sent a completion notice to Carol's inbox. He received no reply. He locked the alcove and took the stairs to the lobby, where Frances was at the end of her shift and pulling her coat on with the particular efficient movements of someone who has performed the same action hundreds of times. "Long day," she said, which was not a question either. "Hartwell," he said. She made a sound of understanding, the kind that communicated familiarity with the Hartwell file's demands without needing to specify them. She adjusted her coat collar, picked up her bag, and said, "The new temp asked me today who organizes the building maintenance schedule." Roberts picked up his briefcase. "What did you tell her?" "I told her it was you." Frances tucked her bag under her arm. She wrote it down. He held the lobby door for her. She thanked him and stepped through into the cold evening. He followed, and for a moment they stood on the front step together in the same quiet they had shared hundreds of times before, without making anything of it. And then they separated toward their respective trains. 3 days later was when he found the note. He found it on a Wednesday, early morning, before the rest of the staff had arrived. He was in the document preparation room on the 3rd floor, transferring a batch of archived compliance files to the shredding tray, working through the stack with the methodical pace the task required. The shredder was in the far corner, beside the recycling bins, and the lateral filing unit that held the firm's quarterly reports going back 14 years. He had fed 7 folders through the shredder and was picking up the 8th when his hand found a folded piece of paper on the floor between the shredder's base and the wall. It had probably slipped from a folder that had already gone through, carried by the air current the machine produced. He almost dropped it in the recycling bin. He was holding it over the bin, in fact, when he read the 4 words visible through the fold. "Burn it after reading." He read them twice. Then he unfolded the page. The handwriting was precise and unhurried. The letters formed with the particular deliberateness of someone who had been educated in cursive and had never entirely abandoned it. The note was 8 lines long, written in blue ink on a half sheet of plain paper rather than firm letterhead. He read it. "The firm's most indispensable person holds no formal title and receives no formal credit. The operational competence that insulates this partnership from logistical failure resides in a single individual whose compensation, visibility, and standing are misaligned with his actual contribution to the firm's functioning. A formal restructuring of this situation is warranted. This observation is not speculative. It derives from 6 months of direct review." He stood with the note in both hands for a long time. The shredder had gone quiet. The document preparation room was still. The early heating had come on and was ticking through the ductwork in the way it always did in the first half hour, a soft, metallic percussion that had been background music to his mornings for years. He recognized the handwriting. He was certain of it before he had finished the thought, the same way you are certain of something that has already settled before the conscious part of your mind catches up. 3 months ago, possibly 4, he had done a small errand for the administrative coordinator, taking a package to the 3rd floor mailroom. In the mailroom slot assigned to his alcove, there had been a card. Not an official firm card, not a printed certificate or a form acknowledgement. A plain card, cream-coloured, with a single handwritten line inside. For keeping this place together, quietly. Nothing more. No signature. He had propped it against the 2nd filing cabinet for a week before he put it in his desk drawer, mildly puzzled by it, assuming it was from someone on the paralegal team who did not want to make it official. The handwriting on the note and the handwriting on that card were made by the same hand. He read the note again. 6 months of direct review. Delia had been at the firm for 12 days. He folded the note along its original crease. He put it in the inside pocket of his jacket against the fabric, where it sat with the slight warmth of something that had been written by someone who had been watching a great deal longer than 12 days. He finished the shredding. He went to his desk and sat there for a few minutes with his coffee, letting the information settle the way sediment settles in still water, slowly and completely, until the picture at the bottom becomes clear. He did not go to the filing department. He did not change anything about how he moved through the building that day. He went about his work the way he always went about his work. And when he passed the East Wall filing department at 11, Delia was at her desk, reading through a set of quarterly reports with a red pencil in her left hand, and she looked up when he passed and gave him the plain nod that had become their shorthand across the past 2 weeks, and he gave it back. He told no one. There was nothing, at that point, to tell. The worst of Carol's behavior arrived on a Thursday, 10 days later, in the small boardroom on the 3rd floor, where she was meeting with a client Robert knew by name as Dunmore, a property developer with 3 active matters at the firm, and a habit of arriving 20 minutes early and rearranging the furniture to his preference. Robert had come to the boardroom at 1:45 to verify the catering setup, because the meeting was scheduled for 2, and the catering service had delivered to the wrong room that morning, and he had quietly corrected the error and reset the room, and was on his way out when Carol arrived with Dunmore at 1:50. She did not see Robert for the first 2 minutes because she was talking, and Dunmore was talking, and neither of them were looking at the corners of the room. When she did see him, she visibly adjusted her bearing, the way someone adjusts when they have decided to perform for their audience. "Dunmore, I should mention we've been doing some restructuring of support functions," she said, not to Robert, just into the air of the room with him in it. The associates are taking on more of the direct client service. She gestured in Robert's general direction. "This is Robert. He manages our supply operations, ordering, filing, that sort of thing." Dunmore glanced at Robert with the polite blankness of a man who has been told where the coat rack is. "And we have a temp at the moment," Carol continued, still addressing Dunmore. "A girl named Marsh, doing some of the document review work. Temporary arrangement." She said the word temporary the way people say words when they want to ensure something registers as small. She's not part of the core team. Robert picked up the empty catering tray he had come for and carried it out of the room. He kept his pace even. He kept his expression level. He went to the kitchen, set the tray on the counter, and stood for a moment looking at the window above the sink, which looked out over the same mechanical terrace as the 2nd floor window, just from a steeper angle. He had known in the abstract that Carol thought of him as furniture. He had adjusted for it the way you adjust for weather, carrying an umbrella in the relevant seasons, and not requiring the weather to apologize. He had not minded it particularly, or had told himself he did not mind it particularly, which was nearly the same thing for most purposes. What sat differently about this occasion was the word temporary applied to Delia, spoken in that bored, dismissive tone to a client who would now carry that characterization forward into every future interaction with the firm. Carol had reduced Delia to a placeholder in front of someone whose opinion had real consequences, and she had done it without any particular malice, which was somehow worse. She had done it with the ease of someone whose worldview was so completely organized by rank that the people outside the rank did not merit the effort of specific contempt. Robert washed the catering tray by hand, dried it, put it in the correct cabinet. He went back to his desk and finished the supply reorder he had started that morning. He said nothing to Delia. He did not need to. She had not been in the boardroom. She had not heard. And it was not his place to carry Carol's opinions to the people Carol's opinions diminished. 2 days later was when he made the decision, though he did not think of it as a decision so much as a continuation of what he had always been doing. It announced itself at 7:40 in the evening, when the email came through from the Hartwell paralegal to the firm's general administrative address. The Hartwell matter had a new exhibit filing deadline, which had been moved forward by the opposing counsel's court filing that afternoon. The new deadline was midnight. The exhibits needed to be cross-referenced, formatted to spec, logged with the tracking number, and uploaded to the court's electronic filing system before 12 o'clock. The paralegal's message noted that she had forwarded the deadline information to Carol, who was at a client dinner, and had not yet responded. It also noted, in the practice-neutral tone of someone who has worked in legal administration long enough to know that certain problems become someone else's problem depending on how late it gets, that the administrative support window for this kind of task officially closed at 6. Robert read the message at 7:40. It was now 7:42. He had been on his way to the elevator with his coat and briefcase. He went back to his desk. He pulled up the Hartwell file. The exhibits were partially formatted from his earlier indexing work, which gave him a partial foundation. The cross-referencing against the updated brief required going through 41 pages of opposing counsel's filing and mapping each new exhibit number against the existing reference set. The formatting to court spec required the PDF conversion utility and a template he had built himself 2 years ago for exactly this type of deadline. The electronic filing required his access credentials and the court's filing portal, which he had navigated dozens of times. He turned on the second desk lamp because the overhead fluorescent was harsh, and he had learned years ago that he worked more accurately in warmer light. He made a fresh cup of coffee in the kitchen and brought it back to his desk. He opened the brief. He worked through it methodically, the way he worked through everything without speed or drama, checking each cross-reference twice before logging it, and not moving to the next until the previous was confirmed. At 9:15, he found a numbering error in the original index, corrected it, and ran the affected references again from the point of the error to the end of the set. At 10:40, he converted the full exhibit file to the court specification format and ran the compliance check, which passed on the second attempt. At 11:22, he opened the filing portal, entered his credentials, and began the upload sequence. At 11:49, he received the portal's confirmation number. He wrote the confirmation number on a piece of paper, placed it on the center of the paralegal's desk on his way out, and left the building at 11:51. He did not send a message to Carol. He did not send a message to the managing partner. He sent a one-line reply to the paralegal's original message. Hartwell exhibits filed. Confirmation number on your desk. He closed his laptop, put on his coat, and went home. He slept well. He usually did when he had finished a difficult task correctly. It was Friday afternoon, the following day, when the second proximity scene happened, the one he had not planned for at all. He had left his jacket in the file room on Tuesday, draped over the back of the spare chair in the corner, while he worked through a 3-hour folder indexing task. And then he had walked out in the building warmth and forgotten it. He had spent the intervening days assuming it was still there and planning to retrieve it when he next had reason to be in the file room. On Friday afternoon, around 4:15, Delia appeared at the entrance to his alcove with the jacket folded over one arm. She set it on the corner of his desk without ceremony and said, "It was in the file room." "I know," he said. "Thank you." She did not leave immediately. She stood at the desk corner with the quiet that had become familiar over the preceding weeks, and he recognized in it the quality of someone who had more to say and had not yet decided whether to say it. She said, eventually, "The Hartwell filing." He looked at her. "Yes?" "The paralegal told me this morning. She wanted to know who to thank." A pause. She thought Carol had arranged it from the client dinner. He said nothing. "I told her to check the filing portal's user log," Delia said. "The log records the account that initiates each upload." He considered this for a moment. "Did she check it?" "I don't know." Another pause, shorter this time. "I wanted you to know that someone noticed." He picked up his jacket from the corner of the desk and shook it once to settle the fold. He hung it on the hook behind his chair, where it belonged. There was a deadline, he said. It needed to be met. She watched him hang the jacket. She looked at the hook for a moment, then back at him. Yes, she said. It did. She left. He listened to her footsteps in the corridor until they turned towards the filing department and disappeared into the building's ambient sound. He sat for a while after that, with his coffee going cold on the desk, not reading the screen in front of him, not thinking about anything particular, just sitting in the quiet of the alcove with the late afternoon light coming pale through the mechanical terrace window. The weekend passed. Monday arrived with a grey sky and a supply delivery that came an hour early, which required Robert to rearrange the storeroom by 7:45 to accommodate it. He managed this with the same even patience he brought to supply deliveries generally, which is to say without particular pleasure and without complaint, fitting the new cases of legal paper and toner cartridges and coffee supplies into the available space according to the rotation system he had built in the first year, which ensured that older stock was always used before newer stock, and nothing expired on the back shelf. On Monday afternoon, Carol sent an email to the administrative list asking for someone to source quotes for the year-end staff appreciation lunch. This was a task that Robert performed every year, and Carol's message was addressed generically to the list, because she was the kind of person who addressed things generically when she wanted them done, but preferred not to appear to be directing the specific person who would actually do them. He responded within the hour with 3 caterer options and a suggested date range, received no acknowledgement, and filed the exchange in the shared administrative folder. On Tuesday morning, Delia asked him, over the recycled version of their lunch arrangement that had become a quiet fixture of both their weeks, what had happened to the firm's original founding partners. She asked it in the same unhurried conversational way she asked all her operational questions, with the red pencil resting across her legal pad and her rice going slightly cold on the corner of the window ledge. He told her what he knew, which was not insignificant. Sullivan Sr. had retired 7 years ago before Robert's time. Crane had died 4 years ago, leaving his partnership's stake in what Robert understood to be a complicated trust arrangement. Since then, the managing partner had technically been Hartfield, though his primary involvement was in external client relationships, and he spent most of each week at the firm's satellite office across the city. The day-to-day operation ran on the senior associates, which in practical terms meant it ran on Carol and 2 others who were largely interchangeable in terms of their relationship to the firm's operational reality. Delia listened to all of this with the unhurried attention she gave everything. She asked no follow-up questions. She finished her rice. He thought about asking her how long she had actually been reviewing the firm. He did not ask. It was not his information to seek. She had not offered it, and the note in his jacket pocket had not been addressed to him, had not been intended for anyone to read, had fallen where it fell by accident. Whatever she was, whatever her actual relationship to this firm was, it was not his place to press on it. He had read the note twice. He had kept it. He had not changed anything about how he behaved. That was as much as felt right. On Wednesday, a courier arrived at the front desk at 2 in the afternoon. Robert was in the lobby, dropping off outgoing mail, when it happened. He had his back to the front desk, sliding envelopes into the outgoing tray, and he heard Frances say the courier's name and then heard her say, because that was Frances's method with deliveries, the formal name on the package, reading it aloud as she entered it in the receipt log. Delia Marsh Sullivan, Frances said with the particular clear diction she used when logging formal names. Managing Director and Silent Partner, Sullivan and Crane Legal. There was a pause of 2 or 3 seconds while Frances processed whatever was on the label, and then she said more quietly, "I'll need to call this one up." Robert stood at the outgoing tray with his hand still resting on the last envelope. He did not turn around immediately. He let the information organize itself in his chest, the way the note had organized itself in his chest on the morning he had found it, settling through the layers of what he had already suspected and half known, arriving at the bottom where it joined the handwriting on the card and the handwriting on the note and the questions about supply reams and building maintenance schedules and the paralegal's filing portal log. Managing Director, Silent Partner, Sullivan. He turned around. Delia was standing at the entrance to the lobby. She had come from the direction of the filing department, and she was standing still, watching Francis with an expression he had not seen on her face before. It was not surprise exactly. It was the expression of someone who has been waiting for a clock to reach a particular hour, and the clock has now reached it. Francis looked up from the receipt log and found Delia's face across the lobby, and for a single moment, neither of them moved. Then Francis said simply, in the same clear diction, "It was going to come through eventually." "I know," Delia said. Carol was not in the lobby at that moment. She arrived 4 minutes later from the elevator, coming down with a junior associate and a stack of client folders, mid-sentence about something to do with the Dunmore property matter. She saw the courier at the desk, saw Francis still holding the package, saw Delia standing in the middle of the lobby, and said, with the casual authority that was her natural register, "Marsh, if that's for filing review, you can bring it up to the 3rd floor." The junior associate kept walking. The courier stepped back. Francis set the package on the counter and did not move. Delia turned to look at Carol. "It's addressed to me," she said. Carol glanced at the package without slowing. "Right, well, whatever the name is on it, if it's for the audit work, it can go to the 3rd floor review desk." "Carol." Delia's voice was still level, still unhurried. "The package is addressed to the managing director." A brief pause. Carol looked at the package, then at Francis, then at Delia. Francis, with the particular expression of someone who has been keeping a certain kind of account and is now watching it settle, said, "Delia Marsh Sullivan, Managing Director and Silent Partner, Sullivan and Crane Legal. It came in about 4 minutes ago." The air in the lobby changed. Not dramatically, not with any of the declarative force that scenes like this sometimes have in movies or in the stories people tell afterward. It changed the way air changes when a door opens and the temperature differential becomes apparent, a slow equalization that you feel before you can name it. Carol stood at the edge of the reception area with her client folders and her half-finished sentence about the Dunmore property matter, and the sentence did not continue. It stopped where it had been when the temperature changed, hanging in the lobby without anyone to finish it. She said, "I wasn't aware that," and stopped. She said, "The arrangement wasn't," and stopped again. She looked at Delia with the expression of someone who has been navigating by a map that has just been shown to be wrong, and who has not yet identified where the map and the territory diverged. Delia picked up the package from the counter with both hands. She looked at Carol for a moment, directly and without either anger or performance. "The filing last Wednesday night," she said. "The Hartwell exhibits, the midnight deadline. I'd like you to know that Robert completed that filing, alone after hours at approximately 11:50. The portal log will confirm it." She paused. "He didn't tell me. The paralegal checked the log on my suggestion and told me this morning." Carol opened her mouth and closed it again. "He has been completing the work this firm requires for 6 years, Delia continued in the same level voice, "at a compensation and a standing that has not reflected the contribution. That is going to change." Another pause, shorter. "That's all." She did not look at Robert, who was standing at the far end of the lobby counter. She did not look at the junior associate, who had stopped walking. She crossed the lobby with the package under one arm and took the elevator to the 3rd floor, and the lobby returned to its ordinary temperature without fanfare. Carol stood for another few seconds in the space where the conversation had been. The junior associate was watching her with the carefully composed expression of someone filing information away for later. Frances had returned her attention to the receipt log. Robert was still at the outgoing tray, his hand resting on nothing. Carol turned toward the elevator. She pressed the button. She waited for the car to arrive with the expression of someone who has arrived at a destination they were not planning to visit, and she went upstairs without speaking. The lobby was quiet. Frances looked at Robert from across the reception desk. She said nothing. She reached into her ceramic dish, selected a peppermint, and placed it beside his outgoing mail, which was the kind of gesture Frances made in the place where other people used words. He looked at the peppermint for a moment. He picked it up and put it in his shirt pocket. What followed in the next several days was less a single event than a series of small recalibrations, each one quiet and specific, the kind that organizations perform when they have discovered that a premise they were operating on was wrong. Hartfield, the managing partner, came in from the satellite office on Thursday and spent 3 hours with Delia in the third-floor conference room with the door closed. Robert passed the conference room twice that day on legitimate errands and observed only the closed door and the muted sound of unhurried conversation. The junior associates on the compliance review stopped routing their exhibit questions to Carol and began routing them through the paralegal office, which was factually where such questions should have been going all along. Carol spent Thursday and Friday largely in her own office, which Robert noted not because he was tracking her movements, but because her office door, which was ordinarily open for the performance of access, was closed both days. On Friday morning, the HR coordinator sent Robert a meeting invitation for the following Monday. The subject line read, "Administrative Restructuring, Compensation Review." He accepted the meeting without comment and went back to his supply reorder, which needed to be submitted by noon. He did not seek out Delia to discuss what was coming. He did not need to. The note in his jacket pocket had told him everything that needed to be told in the unhurried cursive hand of someone who had already done the review, already reached the conclusion, and had been waiting for the natural surface of things to bring it forward. He thought about the card that had come to his mailroom slot 3 or 4 months before Delia had arrived as a temp at the East Wall filing desk, for keeping this place together, quietly. He had thought it was from someone on the paralegal team. He understood now that it had been from someone who had been watching the firm from a considerable distance, through financial records and operational reports and whatever access a silent majority partner has to the detailed workings of a place she nominally does not appear to run. She had noticed before she arrived. That was the thing that stayed with him. She had been watching a long time before she sat down at his lunch corner and asked him whether the work was satisfying. She had known the answer in broad outline before he had given it. He did not know quite how to place that. He sat with it, the way he sat with most things that required sitting with, patiently, without forcing them to resolve. It was the following Monday, after the compensation meeting, which was brief and factual and carried the tone of something being corrected rather than negotiated, that he was back at his desk in the alcove, in the particular stillness of mid-morning, when the building had settled into its daily rhythm and no task was immediately pressing. He heard footsteps in the corridor. He recognized them. Delia came to the entrance of the alcove and leaned against the half-wall the way she had begun to do in the past week, with the ease of someone who has stopped pretending to be visiting for a reason. "The Hartwell client called Hartfield this morning," she said. "They're extending the retainer. They mentioned the exhibit filing specifically. They noticed it went through with no issues and no delays." He set down his pen. "Good." Hartfield wanted to know who managed it. "What did you tell him?" She looked at him with the considering expression he had learned to read across the past weeks, the one that meant she was giving him the accurate answer rather than the convenient one. "I told him the man who manages it is Robert Sullivan," she said, "and that he has been managing it and a great deal more for 6 years." He looked at her. She looked at him. The heating system ticked in the ductwork. Outside the mechanical terrace window, the light was the particular pale gold of a late morning in early winter, falling flat and clear through the glass and across the worn surface of his desk. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, which was hanging on the hook behind his chair. He took out the folded note. He set it on the corner of the desk between them. She looked at it. She did not pick it up. "I found it by the shredder," he said. "I know," she said. "I went back for it." "It wasn't there." "No," she said. "It wasn't." A small silence settled between them, the comfortable kind, the kind that does not require filling. The folded note sat on the corner of the desk between his pen and the edge of the keyboard, a half sheet of plain paper in the precise, unhurried cursive of someone who had been watching long before he knew, and who had written the truth down and then not been able to let it go through the shredder after all. He left it on the desk. He picked up his pen. Through the mechanical terrace window, the pale winter light held steady against the glass, and the building ran on around them without interruption, the way it had always run, and the way it would keep running, and the way it had always been his to know.